All right, everyone. Hello, hello. We're so excited to have you here. We are just going to get connected to all of our other stations and then we will be ready to rock. I hope everyone is having a fabulous evening. I am a little shocked that it is still like winter is upon us, which is totally fine. Um, I will take that every single day. Hello, hello, hi. Okay, I know you're probably wondering, why does your background look different? Why does it look like you're in pajamas? Why is your hair like that? Well, Baby J and I just did our first traveling to Charlotte without Jeff, and that was so crazy. So I will tell you, this podcast is going to last as long as he does. Um, but you guys, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. For those of you, this is your first podcast tuning in. This is the Alexis podcast. And really what this podcast is designed to do is for you to be able to say and identify like, hey, there's more I want to do with my life. There's more that I want to be able to go for. And I'm maybe just not doing it. Maybe it's because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I'm afraid, but I'm going to just tune in every week because I'm looking and committed to having something be different in my life and having to go for the things that are really important to me. And so what we're going to go over tonight is you've just got to do it, even if it's hard. And the reason that that's so important is there are so many people that get kicked out of the game of life, or they don't even make it in the stadium, is because they're thinking about all of the things that could happen. They are thinking about all of the things that are going to happen. Now the ocean sound is gone. They're thinking about all the things that could happen, that could go wrong, that what if this happens? And well, then what if that happens? And if that happens, then oh my God, what if this happens? And then they find themselves on the sidelines of life instead of actually living it and being a part of it and being excited about it. And I want to just talk through some simple steps for this. If you're feeling there, or if you're feeling like you're at this transition point and you need to re-engage and do something different, how would you do that? And really, it's like there's that thing where it's like, oh, just do it, like just do it anyway. And it's like, yeah, that's super easy to just say, very hard to do. But it's kind of like what we've talked about in previous episodes. Like if you've ever been cliff jumping or if you've ever been on any adrenaline seeking type thing, the longer you wait, the harder it is. The longer you're up there, the harder it is. And giving yourself that grace to trust yourself to say like, hey, I'm going to fucking do this, and jumping and trusting yourself. Because I think so much, and I don't know where you're at in your life when you're listening to this podcast, but my girlfriend and I were talking about when we were in our 20s, we were responsibly reckless. We would go to Europe for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. We would just figure it out. We would go on like these little strolls and then all of a sudden be home at 2 a.m. and we were living and we were going for it. And we trusted ourselves and our intuition. And it's like, why is it when you get into your 30s, mid 30s, that just somehow stops? It's like almost like you're being cemented into, or like the Tin Man off the Wizard of Oz, is you're just being cemented into who you feel like you have to be and you can't change. And you find yourself just stuck. Whereas in our 20s, we were open and available to be anything and anyone we wanted to be. And so as we talk through this tonight, kind of think about what those things are for you, because sometimes they're not events. Sometimes they're conversations. I was talking to my dad and I said, what are the hard things, but you've got to do them anyway. Because for me, one of the things I think about is travel. And I got this when I was single. I got this when we travel in groups. I got this when we traveled with Cam when he was younger. And now I get it when we travel with Jordan. And it's like, how do you do it? It just would be so hard. And it's like, well, just because it's hard doesn't mean it takes you out of the game. Doesn't mean it's something that you just don't consider anymore. And that's really something that I'm finding myself in this stage of my life really wrestling with, is I know that it's hard. I see that it is. And just how do I move past that? How do I move past that to say, wow, I do know that that's going to be challenging. Let's make a plan. Because for me, since I don't know how everything's going to work out, I just freeze. And so really picking your heart and choosing when and how you're going to do it. And so here are kind of the tips I have. So whether that's going to be for traveling, whether that's for a new adventure, whether that's conversations that you need to have and you know that you need to have them, I just want you to tune in and say, I can make a plan. I can do hard things. Cool shit is hard, but it is worth it. And how do you make it worth it? But also trying to identify, what if it's really hard and that's just resistance because I need to go a different way? Because that's a whole different topic. Is if you're chasing after something and you don't feel 100% right about it and something is off and you're just kind of, that may actually not be what I'm about to be talking about. That's, hey, identify that you might be going the wrong way. Identify that maybe what you think is a window is actually a brick wall and you need to turn around and do something different. But go into your space to feel that. We're intuitive beings. You know that. Trust yourself to know that. Because when things feel good and they're hard, like for me, I love traveling. Traveling isn't something that I do. It is simply someone that I am. I have always loved to do it ever since I got to do it, and I'm always going to do it because I love it. And if you don't think that when I thought about traveling in a group or even traveling with Jeff for the first time, they say, like, listen, if you can't make it through a trip together, probably not good, for your relationship. And so sometimes you're not wanting to like test those things out, And so even now, as we were traveling with a baby, we took him to Hawaii when he was 3 months old. And I was absolutely nervous about that. I was nervous that people were going to be hating us and hoping and wishing a slow death on us if our kid cried the entire time. I was worried I was worried about 9,000 things, to be honest with you. But I would have stolen so much joy from my life if I would have fed into those fears. But I still wanted to go. I still felt good about it. But if you're kind of meeting this impasse and you're like, something isn't right here, do not listen to this. Honor your intuition and turn around. But for those of you that are wondering, like, no, I want to do it. How do I do that? Here's what I've found so far. And here's something that I'm going to adopt. We have a change coming up in our family that for me is really scary. And everyone is like, oh, it's just temporary. And I'm like, we're not really temporary kind of people. We're like in it kind of people. We're like, oh, we did that one thing. Now we've done it for 5 years. That is just who we are. And sometimes I will do that even if I hate it. So here's what I've been telling myself I'm going to do is I'm going to write down everything I'm afraid of on if this didn't go wrong. So like things I'm afraid of when I fly, turbulence, flown 100 times, still terrifying. My baby crying the entire time. And when I'm feeling that fear, it feels really big, really big. But as I'm talking about it, it's like, okay, worst case scenario, he cries the whole flight. Every person wants to spit on my grave, but it's only 3 hours. Like I can make that happen. And so writing that down, what are those fears? And then finding a space and a time to talk about them. I would not recommend talking about it in the beginning. Because if you do it in the beginning, 12 times out of 10, you're going to say some shit you didn't want to say. And you're going to be feeling some things that you don't necessarily feel long term. There are things that I'll feel when I get really antsy or anxious that feel like 100 out of 10, but really they're like a 2. But in that moment, they just feel so big. And being able to talk through those things in a safe place. Because when I'm feeling everything that could go wrong, it feels so heavy. When I talk about things that I think can go wrong, it's like they go from being a monster to being a mini. And giving yourself that space. And it doesn't have to be with your spouse. It could be with yourself. It could be just saying it out loud. Like, oh, well, if my kid cries the whole flight, what am I going to do? And then at least and being able to make a plan about that. So we're going to make a list. We're going to write down everything we're afraid of on if it doesn't work or if it does work, like whatever it is, making that list, finding a good space to talk about them, whether it's with yourself, your best friend, your spouse, but then also it's important to make a list of what would happen if it went right. What would happen if everything lined up the exact way you should be? One of the things we talk about in our household is being happy, healthy, whole. And what would it look like if we ended up happy, healthy, whole? What's the winning side of that? Because for me, I don't know how it is for you, but I get really anxious about what could go wrong. and the cost of it and the long-term cost of it. And I could fucking see 12 years in the future about how one decision could just somehow rabbit hole and make this really big, scary, awful life. Instead of thinking, oh, what could go right about this? How could this benefit everyone? How is this a win-win? And then the last thing I'm going to leave you with is just making a plan with that information. Sometimes the risk isn't worth the reward. But sometimes the reward isn't worth it without the risk. And just because something is hard doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Because a lot of times you need to figure it out. If you can gamify it and be like, we have this problem. How can I make this work for everyone? And you think of we, then all of a sudden you're finding solutions. But when I'm thinking of what can go wrong, I will guarantee you I'm finding every problem that we can have. I'm finding every problem that we could have today, next week, next month, next year, and for the next 4 decades of our life. But I don't always do that when it's what could go right. And giving myself a chance to say, hey, what could go right in this? Because it's really scary to think about if it goes right and even if it goes wrong. And so I'm just here to remind you of it's okay for it to be hard. It's okay for you to feel frustrated. It's okay for you to feel small if the problem feels like a monster. But what's not okay is you staying there. What's not okay is you staying there and saying, well, this is how I'm going to live my life. No, check, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. So for those of you that just tuned in, we're going to be making some lists. That hard thing that you've been kind of wanting to do, but you're a little too scared, or there's way too much anxiety around, I want you to make a list of everything that can go wrong. And I know some of you are like, we should do about what's going to go right. Yeah, we're going to do that later. But it's a lot easier for people like me and maybe people like you to write down everything that you could think of that could go absolutely wrong. And then talk about it. Because once you talk about it and you identify it and you put a name to it, that monster becomes a little mini thing. It becomes a bite-sized thing that you can work around. And then if you can, make a list about what could go right. Because I don't really do that enough. I don't think about if we got everything we ever wanted to get. I'm kind of mitigating what could go wrong and how I'm going to fix it and what that looks like from there, that I don't give myself a chance to dream about, man, what if that hard thing, what if it was happy, healthy, whole for everybody? And daydream about what that would look like and help that kind of narrow down where you want to go and what you want to do. And then make a plan from there. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is cool shit will be hard. But it will be so worth it. And it's okay if it's hard. And it's easy to say it's hard, but what's great to know is we're all out there doing hard things. Every single one of us. And most of the time, not most of the time, some of the time, we're doing hard things we don't even like that aren't even aligned with who we are. So think about that for a second. How many hard, shitty, awful, not fun things have you done and they weren't even for your highest, greatest good? They weren't for the dream of a lifetime. They weren't for a trip of a lifetime. They weren't for taking a risk to getting you to where you want to be. We'll do things we don't like and stay in places we don't belong anymore because it just feels safe. It feels comfortable. And even if we don't like it, it's familiar. We'll stay in suffering to stay in familiarity. And I urge you that if you're looking for that different thing, if you're looking for that switch, if you're looking for that change, you don't have to be Miss Positive Polly over here thinking that nothing's ever going to go wrong. I don't feel safe like that. I feel safe knowing the 97 things that could go wrong and what I would do in all 97 situations. But don't let it keep you from living a life that you want to live. Don't let it keep you from letting your family live a life that you want to live. It's okay to be scared. It's okay for it to be hard, but it's not okay for you to say, well, then I'm not going to do that then. Trust yourself. Make a plan. Talk about it. And I can't wait to hear about all the cool, hard shit that you were overcoming in your fitness, in your relationships, in your travels, in your adventures, in your jobs, everywhere. You can do this. We can do this. Have a great night, everyone. Good night.